Hello, everybody. Here is the Disruption Network Lab from Kunstquartier Bethanien. We are live from Berlin. In front of us, we have only the speakers and the audience is online. So first of all, I would like to thank the speaker for being here and the audience that is following us. I am Tatiana Bazzichelli, the director of the Disruption Network Lab, and together with me, the other co-director.
Yeah, my name is Lieke Ploeger, and I'm the director of the community program of the Disruption Network Lab.
And we are a team of several people that did great hard work for reaching the point of this conference. So I would like first to thank them, Elena Velianowska and Nada Baker for the production, Jonas Franchi for the designer, Alana Travers for the communication, Claudia Trapp for the press, and Rana Vadikari that is taking care of the streaming, and Francesco Mancori of the lights. And Elle that is there with us since 5 years, working with the sound technology. So after this, thanks to all of them, I will introduce the conference. We are planning to do 3 days conference. So we start today with a really interesting and deep program that is focusing on the discourse of borders of fear. So this is the title that we choose for this conference. That is our 21st conference. And we are going to focus on migration, security, and control. When we were deciding to create this conference and thinking about the discourse of borders, we wanted to discuss 2 different aspects. From one side, a very physical one that is related to the closure of frontiers and also the creation of refugee camps, the escalation of security. And today, for example, we'll also have a panel about pushbacks. That is a very important topic that is often neglected, that we really want to discuss about. And at the same time, we also wanted to speak about borders at a political level and the idea that borders can also be created politically, mentally, and as a form of cultural closure. So we want to analyze also what is the narrative around the discourse of migration and also how often the migrants are stigmatized. And usually, as we do at the Disruption Network Lab, we try to unfold the subject from very different points of view. And hopefully, we don't only present questions, but also we try to give some answers. There is also an important aspect that I wanted to discuss because we also decide to share an internal policy on which kind of images and videos we are showing here. Because of course we all know that when we speak about the discourse of migration, is a very difficult topic in understanding how to depict the people that are subjects of violence, border controls, and also persecution. So we decide here at the Disruption Network Lab to have a very specific way of dealing with this. And so we ask our speakers to avoid showing people faces without their consensus, in case blur the faces, and also not to show explicit context of violence without the consent of the people. Will be only an exception, but also there not too much, because we know that we won't show the face of the person. But this will be the case of showing an evidence at the borders, and in that case the video is important also for what we are trying to demonstrate here. But I wanted to point out this because I think it's a very important issue that should be discussed on every conference that speaks about refugees, migrants, and the border security and control. And now I will leave the word to Lieke that will explain a bit more about the program and also thanks our funders.
Thank you. Yeah, before we go into a bit more about the program, I would like first of all to thank the funders that also made this conference possible. So first of all, the Senatsverwaltung für Kultur und Europa, the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, the Riva and David Logan Foundation, and the Checkpoint Charlie Foundation. We're also supported in part by a grant from the Foundation Open Society Institute in cooperation with OSIFE of the Open Society Foundations. And this conference also forms part of Reimagine Europe, which is co-funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union. And finally, we're also running our program this year in partnership with the Guerrilla Foundation, especially for the community program. Then for this specific conference, we've also started collaboration with Transparency International, the Rogue Agency for Open Culture and Critical Transformation, the Migrant Media Network, and Emergency. And we also want to thank our partner venues, the Kunstraum Kreuzberg-Betania and Akut Macht Neu. And finally, also our media partners, Taz, die Tageszeitung, Ex-Berliner, Il Mitte, and Furtherfield. So many thanks to all of those funders, collaboration partners, and supporters. And then before we go into the conference of today, I would like to briefly say something about the community contribution to the conference. So as part of the community program, we're organizing a community panel on Sunday, as well as 2 workshops. So the first of these workshops is happening tomorrow, on Sunday, the 29th of November. And it will be a workshop on critical tools for counter-investigations. And this workshop will be given by Dimitra Andritsu of Forensic Architecture, that will also be speaking in a panel later today. So in this workshop, we will go step by step through various investigative methodologies for counter-investigating state and corporate crimes, which can help us to pursue accountability. And then,
yes, so
thank
you very much. I will start then introducing the first event of the day. We have a short film from Josh Begley, and then I will be back on stage having a conversation with Renata Avila. So just a short introduction about the film. This film is actually longer, or what we are showing here today is 7 minutes, and is also a very popular film that you can find online, and we are also going to show the longer version online. But today, for the introduction, we decide also to have the shorter version of it. I wanted to say a bit more about Josh Begley. He's the director of 2 short films. One is Best of Luck with the Wall, that we are going to show in a minute, and also Concussion Protocol, that are both produced by director Laura Poitras, that was also with us here in 2015. This film that we are going to watch is actually a very interesting one, because Josh Begley is a data artist and also a filmmaker. So in the films that he creates, there is always a very interesting way of using data. And in this specific film, we have a short documentary about the geography of the US-Mexico border. Was made with 200,000 satellite images that were downloaded from Google Maps. And is a film also that received the honorary mention at the 2017 Prix of Ars Electronica. And in his description of this short film that is about the US-Mexico border, it's also interesting what he says, because he says that a wall is a border that is brought into 3D. Let's watch now this short film, and then we will go more into the subject of the Mexico border with Renata Avila. Thank you. Okay, so we are back together with Renata Avila, that I'm very happy to welcome. Also, Renata has been many times with us in the past, a conference that we organized in 2018, the Hate News, and then also to our Disruptive Fridays. So I'm very happy to have Renata back with us. And when we were discussing, you know, she is an expert of so many different subjects that perhaps we could invite you for each conference that we do. And I'm sure you will have a lot to say. So I want to introduce also Renata properly. She's a lawyer, an author, and advocate from Guatemala. She has more than 15 years of experience in technology and human rights. She's an expert in digital rights and studied the politics of data, the evolution of transparency, and what she describes as digital colonialism. So for us, it was very important to have you here today to follow up this short film by Josh Begley and to discuss also in the context of border security and control, what does it mean, these borders, and also the whole debate around the Mexican wall that has been created during the Trump administration. And also we know that now became a sort of a metaphor of anti-immigration policy that has been very strong during the Trump administration, and also we all know about a high number of families that were separated, children held in detention centers, and also asylum seekers that were returned to Mexico. But of course, this situation, escalated during Trump, but has always been there. So we want to know from you your perspective on this subject, and if you can tell us more.
Thank you, Tatiana, for having me here. I hope, yeah, now it's working. Thank you, Tatiana, for having me here, and thank you for Berlin for hosting me for a little while. And to me, this film is very personal, and this topic is very personal because that wall was designed to keep people like me out, people holding my passport, and my people, basically. And you might have not experienced that, but traveling with a Central American passport, traveling with a Guatemalan passport, which, by the way, it is a privilege to even have the money to get a passport and to get an ID allowing to travel in my country, especially if you're a woman. But if you have experienced borders, I think that the first encounter with a border, if you are a Central American, is horrible. I think that it will be like the perfect experience to illustrate profiling, to illustrate the police state, and to illustrate oppression from the other. And the experience is as it goes. Either if you are traveling by land or by air, you will be chosen, like randomly, always, put on the side, and ask the most embarrassing questions that they will never dare, the police border will never dare to ask a European or to ask a Canadian, for example. And it is humiliating because the assumptions, and that's very relevant for the world, the digital world that we are building, but I don't want to jump into that like just now. The assumptions is if you are a woman traveling alone, that you are carrying drugs, that you are entering, just crossing the border to work in the country and stay forever, that you are seeking for a husband, or that you're like basically that you are cheating in the system. Even just traveling, just the act of traveling is a flag, is a red flag. But what I want, but I'm privileged. I mean, I'm the picture of privilege in my country. And if I experience that barrier, that hostility, that policing, that profiling, is nothing compared to what indigenous Guatemalans and peasants from Central America experience. Because the first wall that they find, the first wall that they encounter is in their own countries. And that has been like really increasing in the last, I would say since the 90s, since the free trade agreements, which it was this pact of open borders for products, closed borders for people. And what the effects of that policy, it has been devastating. I mean, the effects of an international policy in the local communities have been devastating in agriculture, in a way of life, like basically it wiped out and completely destroyed a way of living of these people. And the borders that for example, if I think of, if you saw all the children in cages, the first barrier that they will have in the country that they come from is language. Mexico has hundreds of languages, Guatemala has 24 languages. They couldn't even find a translator. Like, language is a barrier, language is a border. If we ignore that other people speak other languages, that's the first push away. The other is race. It is a very real border, and it's very interesting because the US always tries to pretend to be diverse, but there are like very real classifiers, social classifiers that push you out of circles of power and decision and so on, and it is a fact that race played a role in the treatment that these people received. But the other border, I will say the most brutal border, is the one that we didn't get rid of, and it is the oligarchies in our countries. There's a pact of elites. Imagine having your own version of Trump, in each and every country, and all of them becoming friends and making this pact of keep people oppressed, of keep people underserved, of never paying taxes, and of keeping the peace by force. That's what we have in the region, and actually what you have seen with the drama of the migrants to the US, it is the direct result of the most brutal inequality. Countries like Haiti, like Guatemala, like Honduras, Panama, if you look at the indicators, are among the most unequal countries in the world. And I think that that's very important to keep in mind, because migration doesn't happen because it happens. It's the accumulation of, and migration should happen like freely, you know, but this dramatic migration of leaving everything behind with betting to the destiny and seeing if you risk your life just because what you leave at home is so unbearable, is the result of a combination of policies and mafias that are celebrated instead of being shamed. So that's my initial reflection. Very corrupt oligarchs, permanent inequality, weapons, lots of them coming from the US, and systemic push for free trade that doesn't include people.
Yes, also I want to say that last year, for example, here at the Disruption Network Club, we did a conference that was called Dark Heavens, in which we were really describing this phenomenon of the oligarchs that are profiting of dark havens and tax havens. So I would suggest also the audience that is following online maybe to have a look at this, because it's a much bigger phenomenon of what we think and is really global. And I had a question for you, because by also reading your biography and your backgrounds, you often speak about the concept of digital colonialism. So I wanted to ask, what do you mean for that, of course, in relation to this discourse we are doing on the borders, migration and security?
You know, it's very interesting, because it's super interesting, because I was, a couple of days ago, I was addressing a conference to Africans on data and how political data is. And I was watching the film and the political importance of geographical data and geospatial data. And there's, it slips my mind the name of the Brazilian director who did a movie recently on how you can wipe out of the internet completely places, like basically, and pretend that they don't exist. And I mean, until you verify that this place doesn't exist or does exist, I don't know if what you show me is a fiction. Actually, I will know only by verifying and so on. And what I'm saying in a very complicated way is like maps, satellites, very relevant information is in hands of very few companies, and we have very little say on it. The new borders are drawn or deleted by the systems, and a new border, a new frontier, a new barrier has been created, and it never felt before so physical and so real than during this pandemic. And it is this impossibility to opt out impossibility to conduct a normal life, a productive life, a meaningful life, if you are not connected to the systems, what I refer as digital colonialism. And it's different this time because it's not only the super poor and oppressed that are left out. Of course, half of humanity is still left out because they are disconnected. But if we have seen how easily, how smoothly, how without any friction, certain technologies were imposed on us during this pandemic, without the possibility of opting out, without the possibility of going to work or even circulating freely if you are not on them. So it is or to work or to have this beautiful conference. And so it is very interesting to me how digital is no longer a separate space, it's a hybrid space, and how norms on this space are dictated by systems and by people that we don't vote in, and that we can get vote out, actually.
Thank you. Also, I wanted to ask you by, reflecting on what must be done to change this situation at the border of Mexico. Now, there is also a political transition in US. I don't know how much hope we have about that, but I also wanted to know from you, what do you think really, now has been done so much really to destroy the situation. What can we do to construct something positive?
To be honest, it's really, we need a reset on the system. And addressing just of course, temporarily, there's some ways to alleviate. I don't know if you are familiar with the situation in Central America, but 2 very bad storms devastated the countries. And that, in the past, was enough reason to suspend deportations and to grant a temporary status of protected migrants. That would be the very least I will expect from this administration, but that's only an aspirin to cure a cancer. And the cancer that we need to cure is in the system, in the economic system. And that's not a task. That's not a task that Central Americans versus Mexico versus the US can do alone. That will take a lot of political will, and I will hope that that will take a lot of courage from here, from Europe, to push for an alternative system. And it is really an international, transnational, international, bottom-up, top-down set of measures. It is not a single thing. And it is not something that, the sad thing is that it has been, since the 80s, non-stop, a hostile policy against Central American countries. And the even sadder thing is the Mexicans are treated really bad by the US. The way Mexico treats Central Americans is even worse. So Central Americans, these poor people that you see in these very troubling situations, they face the wall at home with the oligarchy that excludes them from all the systems. Then the wall in Mexico, militarized, brutalized, horrible. And then the wall in the US. So it is a very sad result of a system that is screaming for a change.
Thank you. And since we have also a chat online, and I'm telling the people that perhaps are watching us on YouTube to go on our website, disruptionlab.org. There we can also have the possibility to hear your questions that you can ask directly to the speakers. So I ask Lieke if there is any question from the audience that is watching us online.
Yes, actually, there was 2 really good questions, so I will just ask them to you both, and let's see if we have time for them. There was a question from one person. He said, Cuban asylum seekers that are stranded in Mexico, but then there's also the situation of Cuban relatives in Florida that still vote for Trump. So how does one confront this kind of self-interest? And the second question, also related to Trump, is do you believe that Trump's weaponization of the language with social media, especially Twitter, which he is using as a colonizing or border-making weapon, do you think this has corrupted the potential good that language and social media can do for the future?
I will answer the first one. The first one second, the second first, reverting the order. With the language, it's very interesting because the sad reality is that he was just the megaphone of what a lot of Americans think and a lot of Americans say to us. I mean, experience of Central America visiting the US is finding many Trumps. And the task, I think that more than the use of language, to me is the use of popular channels to come with innovative ways of popular political education to the masses, popular formation of critical mass that finding this unacceptable. I don't believe like actually that fixing terms and terms of service, fixing the moderation policies is doing much because okay, you're silencing a social network, you're still with the same set of racist, racist set of mind. And it will take a lot of innovation and it will take different architectures of co-creation and taking our language back, taking the language of the people back to serve people. On the question of Cuba and Cuban refugee in Mexico, and the difficulties of I mean, we have to admit that our countries are in Latin America are divided, and we have to admit that sadly, Latin America and even the Caribbean are very conservative, are very driven by religion, and somehow very aligned with many of the things that Trump said. And it's a reality that we need to come to terms with because it's a reality that is a result of interventions, military interventions and political interventions in the last 50 years. So I know that the case is difficult to come to terms with these differences of people coming from the same place that you come from. But I will say that the only answer to this is internationalism. With a progressive internationalism and a progressive vision, we find people like us caring about rights. And we create something larger than just a nationality and just a passport. And it's in this international solidarity that we might find, which is the natural way of being humans, in the unity in the difference, principles as the cohesive point, that we will find a solution to smash borders and overcome fear.
Thank you. So I think now we have to transition to the next event, and I really want to thank you, Renata, for being with us and giving your inputs at the beginning of our conference. Thanks a lot.
Until next time.
Thank you. And so now we take 2 minutes just to invite the next speaker here on stage. I will come back in 1 minute to introduce the moderator.